Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Soroka. I'm the founder of NotaryCoach.com and the Sign and Thrive Notary Training Course and Community. I'm excited to have you all here today on a Saturday morning. So first, I just honor you for being so committed to your business to join us on a Saturday. So thank you for being here. This is a very important topic. So I'm going to introduce my friend, my colleague, and a notary expert with over 16 years notary experience. And Laura, how many years as a notary trainer for the National Notary Association now?
14 of those.
14 years as a notary trainer. Laura has proven to be the leading expert on anything notary related. She's helped me out personally. She's helped out so many of our students, and she's the founder of CoachMeLaura.com, helping students all across the country, and the founder and creator of the Laura Biewer Presents program. So Laura, thank you so much for leading the charge on today's topic, this free notary skill builder, your notary journal. What would Judge Judy say?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And I'm so impressed with all of you who are with us live. Over 100 people said, hey, this is important enough for me to be there at the moment, have my own questions answered. And so I appreciate you being with us. I'm going to be sharing my screen here so that I can get to where my PowerPoint is. I think that's it. Okay. And now, here we go. Maybe. Let's see what happens here. All right, so Bill, I'm going to check in with you. I should have my screen up, and we still should see people.
Yes, but there's no slideshow.
No slideshow. Well, then that wasn't the right place. I've got my, well, let me try this. Let me try something else.
Yeah,
Stop share.
As you play with that a little bit, I'll give everybody kind of a rundown on how we're going to flow today. Guys, Laura's obviously got a great presentation. This is in-depth, like how to use your notary journal and why. So sometimes that can be, as Laura and I were joking about, maybe a little dry as we're going through this. We're going to spice it up a little bit. If you have to stop and do jumping jacks or something to keep yourself involved in this, this is that important. Do whatever it takes to stay engaged and involved in this conversation. Let's see. Did you get it, Laura? So as we go through.
I'm bringing it up so I see my slides, but are you still not seeing my slides?
We are not.
I don't know why not. Maybe I have to share a different screen. Let me, trying to think how to not lose you guys while I go back to, I'm going to minimize this for a moment. All right. Escape. I can't escape. It's not going to, see, I'm getting my slideshow, but you guys aren't. All right. Let me just clear it all out here. Go back to my screen where it is.
This is the world of technology, guys. I apologize. And just so you know, well, there could be some interruptions as we go through here on both sides for both Laura and I. We apologize for that, but we'll do our best to keep everything flowing. And then Laura, if you decide that you would rather I run or put up the slideshow, I am prepared to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to try one more time. I cleared everything out. I'm going to try to share it one more time here. Slideshow. My slideshow from the beginning. Now.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, great. Thank you for bearing with me. You know, I really couldn't do much more than email, you know, a year ago. So I'm really impressed with myself that I can even troubleshoot these things. Yeah, it's a lot of progress. So welcome everybody. I have, you'll notice that I labeled my journal my BFF. And you know, that's my pet phrase for my journal. And it has come in handy quite a few times. I've had a detective ask for it. I've testified in court. I've been an expert witness protecting another notary because of their journal. And I've had attorneys call to try to get clarification. So I have used it many times over the 16 years that I've been a notary, and it really is my BFF. And so I'm going to talk to you today, so when you leave, you'll understand the purpose of the journal, the requirements within recording the columns that you record in the journal, and the difference between, you know, compliance versus standard of care or best practice. And then we're going to learn how to work the smart way. So we're going to take the last part of the presentation, once we get past the compliance stuff, to talk about what are ways we can take shortcuts that are compliant, what are ways we can move through the loan signing, trust signing, whatever it is where there's lots of notarizations, which takes a lot of time in the journal, how we can shorten that without rushing our signer. And I think that's really important, is that we want to be efficient and compliant at what we do, but we don't want to be pushing our signer to move ahead. We need to know how to be quicker ourselves. So why do I need a journal? Well, it's evidence that you fulfilled your obligations as a notary, that you fulfilled the notarial attestation that you made. It's accepted in court as prima facie evidence that this is what took place at that time. And your journal recording basically says, at the moment, I was there, and this is what I did with that signer. This journal has been used to solve crimes, many crimes, and those crimes have been real estate, and they've even been murder crimes. If some of you are not aware, 2 of them in California had to do with murder. It's the law. In about 23 states, you're required to do it. And this is a great protection for you in a civil action or lawsuit. Like I said, I was able to help another notary because of her documentation in the journal. And just keeping integrity with what you said you were going to do. As an NSA, if you're an NSA on this call and you've been certified, you've agreed that even if your state doesn't require it, that you will maintain a journal. So American Society of Notaries says that they consider the journaling of every notarial act to be the primary commission responsibility. This is not like if I want to. This is very important. Consistent, thorough journaling provides evidence of particular acts. It also demonstrates the notary's habitual diligence and care. All right, so when you're in court and they're like, are they going to believe you or are they going to believe the signer or whoever it is? When somebody when you say, that's my practice, that's how I do it, and you have a journal that shows that's how you do it, you've got evidence that they don't have. And that tips the scale your way. So I'm going to move us a little bit because you guys are just right on top of my little chart here. Go a little further out of my way. All right, so I'm going to start with the states where a journal is required. And what you're going to notice if you see your state up there, it means, one, you're required to maintain a journal, and that means that the statute specifically states what it is they want to have in it. Some of your states, you'll notice I made a notation, which means only that act is required, and the other acts are not. So, for instance, in Kentucky, only protests, as well as Ohio and Oklahoma, those are the ones that are required. Good idea to do everything, but it's specifically in the statute for that. Louisiana, real property, and then North Dakota, online, and Tennessee, only the acts where you charged money, which I thought was interesting. So if you don't charge money, you didn't have to do it, but if you charge a fee, then you must keep a journal on those. Now the rest of you, if you didn't see your state, it's the language is recommended or encouraged, except New York. New York didn't know what they wanted to do. So New York did not specify anything about the journal, not even the word journal. So if you're in New York, definitely it is, I would recommend it, and it is a standard of care. And if you're an NSA in New York, you should be maintaining a journal. So all of these. What I didn't list here, but was interesting is, you know, we have American territories like Guam and some other places, and so I got to see the rules for that as well, and several of them, they're required to have a journal. And I don't think about the American territories very much. I really just focus on the United States, but when I was doing my research, I found that very interesting. So now what I want to do is talk about journaling in recommended states. So your advantages, if you're not required, but you're doing it, is that you have lots of flexibility in how you organize what you record in there. You can take shortcuts where it makes sense for you to do so, but it would still be obvious what took place. You have the ability to make copies for title companies or the public upon request or not, because it's your journal, it's your tool, and it wasn't required in the first place. Use of an e-journal or any hard copy style. So if you don't want to use a physical journal, you could just use an e-journal instead, because there isn't anything guiding you one way or the other. And if you do a lot of notarizations, I do recommend the e-journal. Much more efficient, and it really nails down, especially if you use one of the ones we have today, where you can't change the timestamp. It can be used as evidence, and they know for sure it wasn't added in somewhere else, later. But let's talk now. So, you're in a recommended state, and easy peasy. You keep a journal, and you get to decide how detailed or non-detailed that journal is going to be. But let's talk about those of us who are in required states. There's different levels of requirement for us. So we have to follow whatever the state statutes are. And I'm going to tell you right now, I went through every single state that said it was required, and I read your statutes on that. Not that I remembered all of them, but I did make notes in today's presentation to give you an idea of how different the statutes are from state to state. I want you to know that that wasn't the only resource I needed to use. There are additional directives or interpretation beyond what's in your handbook. And a lot of times on Facebook, I'll see, hey, it's not in the handbook, it must not be so. But that's not true. In most states, the regulating agency, like Secretary of State, has the authority to interpret what that statute says to implement it and create rules. So they didn't write the law, but they implement the law, and they can write rules about how that law should happen for notaries. So don't, if your Secretary of State, for instance, in California, does a newsletter, this isn't, oh, isn't this nice? This is more direction, more rules for us to implement the statutes that we read. So many states I saw that e-journal was possible, as long as the state approves of that. There is one state, and we'll get to it later, that does not. They said, well, you could have it, but it's a duplicate. You must maintain a physical journal. If you want an e-journal, that's on top of it. The elements that we have to record were different in every state. I did finally narrow it down to the most common ones, and we'll talk about that, and then I'll share with you some of the exceptions I think you'll find interesting. And then there, in states where it's required, there will typically be very specific disposition instructions, like you have to hold it for so many years and then destroy it, or you have to turn it in to the county clerk's office. So look for what should happen with your journal when you're no longer commissioned or moving out of state and you're not going to be a notary anymore. Also, there will be instructions regarding photocopying of your entries, whether it's to agencies or to the public, and a procedure, how that would happen. For some, it's a public record, and you can make the copy upon request. In other states, California being one, it has to be in writing, and I have 15 business days to respond. They have to know 3 things out, the who, what, and when, of what's going to be in your journal in order to get it. So we can do it in California, but there is a procedure specified in our statute about how to do that. So standard of care, another term for that would be best practice. This would be, hey, it's not required, but for the protection of your signer and yourself, it's a good idea. So just if you are in a state that does not have any direction because it wasn't required in the first place, destroy after the statute of limitations your journal. Don't keep them forever. Find out what the statute of limitations is in your state and hold them at least that long from the last entry. and then destroy them so that they don't get lost in a move. They can't get into other people's hands with information they shouldn't have. If you are using certificate forms because the certificate was not did not meet your state's requirements and you replaced it, you might want to make a note of that in the additional information or notes section that you used a loose certificate rather than filling out. If you have witnesses involved because of credible witnesses, let's say, it's a good idea to include them if you're in a state that didn't require the journal anyways. In states where it's required, part of the ID process, I think almost every one of them required you to get that information and their ID. You know, any observations or screenings. So let's talk about the different environments. You know, most of us on this call are mobile, whether the appointment is trust or the appointment is loan signing, whatever it is, general notary work, we are going to them. And we might be going to environments like skilled nursing or hospitals where people may or may not be alert and aware, right? We're going into an environment that there should be a red flag going up for us. I don't have that red flag going up just because I go into somebody's home and they're older. I assume that they're alert and aware, and then I look for symptoms that tell me they're not, like they're confused, they can't communicate with me directly, they're not able to follow instructions. Those are things I look for. But when I go into these special types of environments, I already know there's a reason they're there. I don't know why. I mean, maybe they just broke their foot and there's nothing to do with their mind, but I need to check that out. And if I'm going to check that out, it's a good idea to document it in the notes section. Now, I use the word screened in mine. That's code for me that says I took a minute or two to have a conversation and to feel confident that they're alert and aware. Montana takes it a step further. They say, hey, you really need to check out their competency level. And there are some other things that they recommend to ensure that. In most states, however, it's really more about, are they alert and aware about signing the document. If you're taking care of a foreign language document, and that's okay in almost every single state, you don't have to be able to read it. You just have to be able to speak to your signer. Because remember, we're not certifying the contents of the document. What we're certifying is the right guy signed the document. But it would be a good idea to maybe put it in the notes section that it was a foreign language document and this is the language it was. You can also use that if you can't make out what the name of the document is and your signer isn't able to help you with that, you could put foreign language document in the name of the document with the language. So one of the things that I saw across the board for all the required states, and so I think it's a best practice or standard of care, is write a full description of the document involved. So for instance, it was a deed, and here's the address, street address for that particular property, or the type of deed. I see a lot of times just the word deed, you know, but there's interspousal deeds, and there's quitclaim deeds, and there's grant deeds, and there's TOD, which is transfer upon death deeds, and there's deeds of trust, and there's reconveyance deeds. I mean, there's like 20 different deeds. So be more specific about that description, and I typically pick the title off the top of the document. Sometimes my signer doesn't sign in front of me. Now, everybody on the call should be aware that for an acknowledgement, I don't have to watch them sign. I can take their verbal acknowledgement face to face, and that would be acceptable. Yes, I signed that document before I got to you. So it might be a good idea to write that in your notes or your additional information that it was a verbal acknowledgement, so that if you had to go back and look at it and you were asked in court, did you watch them sign it yourself? You can say, no, they told me that they signed it. And that might make an important distinction because somebody's challenging it later. All right, so those were some of the general points that I wanted to go over before we start talking about every single column. And this is really the meat of this particular video today, that every single column At the bottom, you're going to see typical required columns. These are the ones that pretty much all the states require. And then in parentheses, I named states where there was an exception. I'm going to talk about that. So what I want to do is really right now, I want you to look at the black bar at the top. And what I want you to do is follow with me because I'm going to talk about every single one of these. Now, first of all, just let's look at the layout. This is the layout that you would use if you were using an NNA style journal. But we know there's lots of styles and lots of designs out there you can use. You want to pick one that's comfortable for you, that allows you to move through it, pretty quickly because it makes sense. It's how it follows how you think through and write everything so that you're not like, where is this? Where do I have to write this? The other thing that's important is make sure that it has all of the columns, at least, at minimum, that's required in your state. So for instance, there are some journals out there that don't have a place for a thumbprint. I couldn't use that because I'm required to get thumbprints in my state. All right, so that was the overall just design, and none of them said you have to use this design. They all said, look, it needs to be bound, needs to be maybe numbered pages, but they did not say you had to use so-and-so's journal or it had to be laid out this way. So let's talk about that first column. That first column is the month, day, year, and time of the notarization. What's required of me in almost all the states that are, actually every state that there's a requirement, is the date the signer appeared in front of me. So this is not the date of the document. This is not maybe the date even they signed it. This is the date that they were standing in front of me that I'm performing that notarization. That's the date I need. Now you can write it in numbers like I have it demonstrated here. You could write it out, November, NOV, 23rd, 2017. That's up to you as long as we can tell what it is. Let's talk about the time. Again, most of the states had the time, but Maryland, Missouri, Nevada, I apologize, somebody rang the bell at my house, and Texas do not require the time. Now, I like putting in the time. It is required for me in my state, and I would put it in anyways because it just narrows down exactly when you were with them. The type of, so that's the date column, and the time, except for those 4 states I mentioned at the bottom, it is a requirement if you're in a state that requires the journal. The next one is the kind or type of notarization, and I see confusion when I help or coach notaries on this particular column. You can see the word acknowledgement. This is where you write the name of the notarial act you're performing. So acknowledgement, jurat, oath, copy certification, whatever it is it may be. A lot of times I'll see that sometimes they'll put the name of the document there by mistake, like affidavit. So affidavit is the name of a document and doesn't go there. The affidavit probably had a jurat, was probably the notarial act you performed, and that's what would go there. All right, so the type of notarization across the board, every single state required that. The next column is the address where I was standing or sitting performing it. Now, this is an optional column. None of the states require it, not even California. It's just, again, an extra piece of information that's a good idea because you may not meet them at their home. You may have met them at Starbucks, at your own office, at a park, at a hospital. The bigger and better and specific picture you can draw for somebody who's looking at this later, it makes a difference. And I'm going to tell you my own story of the first time I had a detective contact me about a notarization I performed, and I had performed it 3 years prior. So now she's asking me about not about journal entry, but about the notarization 3 years after the fact. Do you know how many? I do 4,000 to 5,000 every year. I'm not going to remember the details, but I have the journal entry. And she said, oh, fabulous. Can we look at that? And of course, law enforcement, I open it. That's it. I said, I keep those journals. I have them. Give me the date so I know what to look for and the signer's name. I found it. And I had a whole story going on about this particular signer. I met her at a rehab facility because she was recovering from a stroke. And then in my additional notes, I had that her handwriting didn't match, her signature didn't match her card because she couldn't really get her hand to work well because she was recovering from that stroke. I also had that because this was a healthcare directive, I had an ombudsman, which is the patient advocate and required for this kind of document in most states, verify she was alert and aware, she knew what she was signing, this is what she wanted, and I had that person's name. And then her daughter was there, and I had the daughter's name. So, and then I had the lady's thumbprint, because that's a requirement in California, right? So look how much information I had. So what was the detective's issue? The issue was somebody claimed it was fraud. It wasn't that lady. That's not her signature. And it was a daughter making the claim. Once she saw my journal entry, she said, oh my God, I know what's going on here. This is family drama, because it was the older daughter who was making the claim. It was the younger daughter who was with me at the time of the notarization. And when she saw, she said, hey, that's not my mom's signature. And she would name me to be in charge. My sister would never be in charge. Now she knew the whole story. We closed the book and she knew exactly what she needed to take care of. Look how easy that was for the detective to really get the sense of what happened. And look at all that information I described for you, none of it was required. But that's how I handle my journal, because I'm thinking, what might somebody need to know about this? What might I have to remember that I can't store in my memory? All right, so we were talking about the address where I performed it, optional for everybody, a good idea. The document type, this is usually the one that I see gets confused with the notarial act type. The document kind or type means what's the name of the document for which you're performing a notarization. As you can see, I have examples: full reconveyance, warranty deed, deed of trust, CC&R documents, tract map, a subordination agreement. That's the description. And you want to either take the title, if the title's too long, then do the best that you can with the space that you have to describe it. I'm just looking at my notes at the bottom. Document name. I want to tell you that every state that requires a journal required a document name or description. Texas, in addition, requires the date of the document, not just the name. You'll see there's a place where it could be put in there, but for all of the rest of us outside of Texas, it's not required to write that down. But again, that's a great piece of information to tie down that particular issuance or revision of that document. And then finally on this page, and we'll have another one for the other half, is going to be the name and address of signer. So here's interesting. Everybody thinks, oh my God, California has to write everything. Every state that requires a journal wanted the name and address of the signer except California. That's not a requirement for us. That's an actual column. That's like the where I met them column, where I could write it one time and I could take a shortcut in that area. And we'll talk about shortcuts in a little bit. So if you're in California, it's a good idea to write it at least once. And if you have multiple documents for the same signer at the same time, you could take a shortcut with that particular one. All right, and then the other thing, I'm going to say it here, but it applies to both pages. If you're in Washington, I found this interesting. Attorneys, if they're a licensed Washington attorney, they are not required to keep a journal if they're an attorney notary. As long as they have other documentation in their office that would demonstrate the notarization. However, that does not go to their staff or any other notaries that might be part of that transaction. Only the attorney notary has that exemption. Now we've got a few more columns here to talk about. So you're going to see on the left the identification of the signer, and there's enough space and boxes and lines to give a full description. So it would be, I would mark my method. One of the things I saw in all of them is method of identification, which could be personal knowledge, could be satisfactory evidence based on identification card, or could be human IDs called credible identifying witness or witnesses, or sometimes they're called credible person. And you'll see there's a place where you can mark a box. If you're in California, we are the only state that does not allow personal knowledge. The other 49 do. So we will never mark that box, even if we do know them. It doesn't matter. We're not allowed. We would be using the ID card line or credible witness line only. And then within the lines, we would be putting the serial number, the expiration date, or the date of issuance, and describing what it is, California driver's license. Now, actually in California, besides that, we need to say who issued it, like DMV. That would be a requirement. But in most of the other states, describing it, for instance, it's a California driver's license, or let's say it's a Montana driver's license. I want to use them in particular. Montana, Oregon, Texas, no numbers. Just what was the description of the card and when did it expire? So you're just describing the card you used rather than having as much detail as you see up here. If I didn't name that state, then you need to have all of it. The next column is additional information. This is where I was talking about all that extra stuff. Screened, my second credible witness might go here. I always write the title company or attorney I'm working for, or I have a code that means it's just the signer, right? I use private myself. Private means the signer arranged it, the signer's paying for it. Whereas if it's a title company or signing service, I always write them down because now I can tie that work to a job that I did if I have to go back and match it up. Also, I'm trying to think what else I might put in there. This one is an example of loan numbers. There could be other things, whatever you think might be of value in the future, okay? Also, this can be used for signature by mark witness. That would be something else we could put in there. Or if it was a signature by proxy. So that's the additional information. Again, if I had all that information in one field for that lady, but then I had another document. So I just did a down arrow mark because it was the same ombudsman, it was the same daughter, it was the same everything. I didn't need to rename it. All right, so now let's go to the fee, because the fee column is the one that is a requirement except Washington, Hawaii, and Massachusetts. What you would normally put here is not more than the mandated amount that it says in your state. The purpose of the fee column typically is to demonstrate you're not overcharging. And I know a lot of us on this call are doing loan signings, or we're doing trust signings. So we're going to have a lot of them. And I'm going to give you one example of how I do it. However, that doesn't mean that's how you have to do it, or that that's the right way to do it in your state. For me, I put the maximum allowed, 15, 15, 15, whatever it is. And when I run out of money, meaning this job maybe I had, let's say, 4 notarizations, but I only had enough money that they paid me to cover $45 of it in notary fees. The next one I'm going to write a 0. All right, so that's, for instance, if I got $100, I do 6 at 15, the 7th is at 10. That adds up to $100. Some states, let's see, who was it? There were some, oh yeah, I told you. So Washington, Hawaii, and Massachusetts, you can do what you want because they don't require you to track the fees in the first place. If you are doing one entry, because there are some states that allow for you, if you're taking care of the same signer with multiple documents at the same time, that you could group that into one line and then put what the amount is. So I really encourage you to look at your state statute. I'm going to cover about 80% of what you need to know, but there could be some small details in your state that you're going to want to check out and make sure that you are following how they want it to happen. And if they didn't specify how to do it, you might want to make a call and find out that way, or go to their website. Sometimes they'll have FAQs, they'll have other pieces of information you can look at. So that was the fee column. The signature, you would think 100% of the required ones would require the signature, but actually the signer's signature is not required in Oregon, Nevada, and Texas. So I didn't find it in the statute anywhere that they had to collect that. But what a great way to demonstrate personal appearance, right? Is you got their signature, right there. And then finally, you've got the right thumbprint column. So, of course, in California, it's required. As a matter of fact, I didn't see another state where it said thumbprint required. It's required in California, but not for all documents, only for real estate documents, so your loan signing documents, and powers of attorney, any kind of power of attorney. That's where it's required in California. Everything else is optional for us. And by the way, let me just mention, COVID-19 did not stop us from collecting thumbprints. You just need to sanitize their thumb first. Now, for everybody else, it's optional, but you know what? In Texas, it's prohibited. So if you're in Texas, not only is it's not optional, it's prohibited. You may not get any biometric from the signer that would identify them. You may not get the numbers off the ID card. You may not record things like social security number, date of birth, those kinds of things. And actually, there's no reason to put those other pieces of information in your journal anyways. No state requires that. So if you're going to get the thumbprint, I'm sure all of you know that people have an idea of how thumbprinting is. It's probably from CSI or NCIS, and they're like rolling the thumbprint and smashing it into your book. And you know, I let them know, you know what, this is a light touch. It's like pushing a doorbell. Just a little push on the doorbell and then a push on my journal. And I get a thumbprint that looks like what you're seeing. That is what my thumbprints look like for my clients who listen to me. I can tell them, light touch, flat thumbprint. Let me have the whole finger. Don't tip it like, let me get my finger in there. Don't tip it like this. I need it flat like this. Sometimes they'll just still do it. And when I see the first one not right, I'll recoach them again about how we can get a better print. And I did mention that the journal has been utilized many times to help solve fraud cases in real estate, murder cases. There were 2 in California. One I remember pretty vividly where it was the thumbprint in particular. And that was because there were twin brothers. And of course, this lady was married to the one guy, but I guess she had an affair with the brother. And they decided to knock off her husband, but not to do it till after they refinanced the house and take out all the equity, so they'd have money to run away with. So they did knock him off. They killed him, and I don't know if he was found under the house where they found him later. In the meantime, though, they went to sign the papers, the refi papers, and the twin brother showed up in place of the real guy. And of course, why would the notary be able to pick that out? She's not going to know he was a twin to begin with, and he looked like the guy in the picture. And the signature looked good enough. It was the thumbprint, because even when you're a twin, your thumbprints are different. And that's how they were able to work on that. So the thumbprint, if you're in a recommended state, if you're not Texas, I recommend you collect it. It's a good idea. Now, if you have 10 documents, you don't need it 10 times unless you're in California. Okay, one's enough. You just need to get one good one. All right, so that's the story about the thumbprint. And so between the first page and the second page, we've got a really good picture of what happened. I'm going to go back to the first page because now you're probably thinking, what the hell are these red circles going on? This example that I'm sharing with you actually came out of a Secretary of State's newsletter. And it was a sample to show where shortcuts are not acceptable. So I want to take you to the month, day, and time, the date, which is required for everybody. And you see they use ditto marks there. That's not acceptable. That's not an acceptable shortcut. You must repeat that repetitive information. All right, that's why it's marked wrong there, because there were 2 issues. That last notarial act where there's ditto marks there was also ditto marks in the type of notarization. Again, the type is not a place to take a shortcut. Now, what kind of shortcut could I take? Well, if you're not in California, you might be able to take abbreviations, right? You might put ACK. Or if you're in the type of journal, the modern journal, where you can circle the A, that might be what you're doing. So here's what I do in California. You see how it says acknowledgement above? I don't handwrite that out. I have a stamp that says acknowledgement, and I use a stamp, and that saves me from writing. So there's more than one way to take a shortcut and still be compliant. Now, you'll notice that they circled those ditto marks under where it happened, but that wasn't part of the wrong. They were just circling all the ditto marks to say we're focusing in on shortcuts. And then where you see the name and address, where there's ditto marks, that's not wrong either. In California, that's not wrong in California. However, I found all the other states required name and address. We're the only state that doesn't require it. So you would not want to take a shortcut where it's required. All right, so wherever the column is required for every notarization, unless your state specifically says you can group them into one, you're going to need to write that out. And on the other one, what was wrong here is you see how the IDs, the ID column, that's a requirement to identify your signer. And of course, if you're in states where you don't have to write the numbers, there's a shortcut for you right there. If you're in states where it's only recommended to begin with, you don't have to write the numbers, or maybe you only wrote it one time, and after that, you're going to use the ditto marks, then it would be okay for you. But if you're in a state where that is required, then you're not going to be able to take shortcuts. You're going to have to write it out. Again, so, you know, California, how do I get around that? I have a stamp, CADL DMV. All I have to do is write in the date, and it has EXP on the bottom. So I've got the preset stuff, and that works about 90% of the time, because most people are using a California driver's license for me. What if it's a different state? Well, then I don't use my stamp. Then I have to fill it out. All right. And thumbprints. So obviously in California, we can never take do ditto marks in place of a thumbprint if it was a required document. If it's not a required document, then you don't have to get it. Just leave it blank. All right. I think this is going to be where we're going to stop.
Yeah.
And start answering some questions. And if I need to come back to one of these pages, I can.
We probably will. This is great, Laura. We have, I think you did a great job of answering most of the questions as they were coming through the chat. There are a couple that just came up.
Okay.
One, can you just confirm the address that is expected in the journal? Is it mailing, physical? Is it the one from the ID, or do you verbally ask the borrower for the address or the signer?
All right. So the statutes don't really declare which address it has to be. So I would tell you that if they're letting me know that's not a good address on my driver's license, I would verbally ask, what is a good address for you? And again, you could make a note, old address on the ID, right? Or previous address. But I believe the spirit of the law here is to get their address of residence.
Okay.
Whatever that really happens to be, which may or may not be where you happen to be. So let's just pretend for a moment that I already wrote it down because that's where I met them, right? If I'm in a state and I have to record the name and address, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save writing that address over into the where it's required column, and I'm not going to do it where it's where I met him. I might put same, right? So why do it twice?
Right. Excellent. Another great question that Yvonne asked, and got some follow-up messaging on, is what happens if people are missing the digit required for the thumbprint, or missing an entire hand or both hands?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I love talking about this in particular because it's like, you know, people don't realize not everything goes smooth unless you're a notary doing the job. So right thumbprint is the expected thumbprint, but I've had them where they didn't have the right thumb. So then you're going to go to the left thumb, and in your notes, you're going to write left thumb, no right thumb available. Right? What if they don't have a left thumb? So now they're thumbless. Okay? I don't know. Maybe they didn't pay their bills. No thumbs. All right. So, so now I don't have any thumbs. Now I'm going to start with the right hand, and I'm going to pick a finger, whatever finger I can get. No fingers here. Pick a finger. And then again, in the note, I'm going to write what it is. What if I can't get any? And I've had that happen several times where either the hand was not attached to the wrist anymore. There was an accident and they don't have a hand, or it was a birth defect and they don't have hands. Those are things that really do happen. In that case, I'm just going to write no thumbprint available in the additional information. And that's perfectly fine. We don't need to go to the toes. We don't need to look at other body parts. Let's just keep it.
No DNA
No.
samples or anything?
Yeah, no, we don't need any of that.
All right, great. Now, guys, just a reminder, this is just the first Q&A, so we still have material after this, and we'll have another Q&A for the general stuff. Cassandra asks, explain the notary fee if you're doing a loan signing package. How does that work?
Okay, so I'm going to use California first as an example, and then I'm going to give you variations. I'm in California. I'm not allowed to write more than $15 in any single entry. That's just the law. I can't do it. So what I can do is put 15 and then the next one 15 and the next one 15. And let's just say I had 6 notarizations. That would be a nice package, wouldn't it? I only had 6, 3 documents. All right, so I had 6 notarizations. That equals $90 in notarial value. And I would put 15 until I got to the 6th one. Now I have 90, but I was paid 100. So I'm sorry, I'm saying 6. Yeah, so I was paid 100. So I had $10 extra. What do I do with that? You don't have to do anything with it because that wasn't notarial value. That was towards your travel or printing or something else. Now I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to say I had 6 notarial acts. That's $90 worth of notarial value, but they only paid me $75 for the job, right? So 5 are going to be at 15. That's 75. And the 6th one is going to be 0 because 75 was all I got. So I hope that description makes sense. All right, so now let's talk about states where you don't require a journal. Anyways, I would write the whole fee amount if you want in the first one and put loan documents so that if somebody says, what the hell, you charge $150, there was only 4 notarizations, you would see, well, these were loan documents. Right, so that's easy if you're in a state. If you're in a state also that doesn't require you to write what the notarial fee was, such as Washington, Hawaii, and Massachusetts, again, you could use the example I just gave, put what you want, or put nothing and just put that there were loan documents. I'm trying to think what other combination. Oh, so if you're in a state that says that you can group them into one entry, or you're in a state that doesn't say anything, so you're going to group them all, I recommend that in the document column or in your notes column that you name what all of them were. Even if you're not going to have separate columns, name all the documents involved. And then in the additional information, you might want to put 6 notarized. And then you could put whatever the fee was for all of that. So now you've captured how much that signer had to pay. They were paying for a loan document signing. And here are all the documents that were involved. So depending on what your layout is, there are other journals that have a place where you can name out all the documents in the same entry. It's really built for grouping, right? So if you have a different layout than this one, it's a little easier.
And the other thing too, right, Laura, is to remember that the journal is not your bookkeeping guide.
Yeah,
right?
let's talk about that, Bill. That's a great point. Personally, I never put the whole fee I'm paid. I only capture notarial value. That's why I do that for 2 reasons. One is I choose to use the exemption for self-employment because I'm a more mature notary, meaning more seasoned experience, older, and I don't need to keep putting more into the Social Security. I've got plenty in there. If you're a younger notary at the beginning of your career, you might not want to do that. Talk to your CPA or whoever does your taxes to determine that. The second thing is that this is a public record. And you know what? They don't need to see my private bookkeeping. That's where I keep my information in, like Notary Assist, and it's separated out there. All right, but this is not your bookkeeping. This is a public record, so anything that I really don't think I need to share with the public or the court or anybody else, I don't put it there.
Beautiful. Patty asks, is it okay to use 2 journals at the same time? One for single documents and one for loan signings? She's in Oregon.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to look at Oregon. There's only one state that allows dueling journals. I want to see if it happens to be Oregon. There's only one state. Everybody else, you got to have one chronological one. But except if you have if you're doing remote notarization, then in those states, they're allowing you to have a physical journal and, electronic journal. But there's one state that does allow for like 2 journals to just have like, this is for business and this is for my business, my employer. Let me see if I can find my notes for Oregon. I want to talk about contemporaneously. Identity, duplicate. Okay, so Oregon has a few interesting rules. If they have duplicate originals, so it's the same document 3 times, they only have to make 1 entry for that. And they could just note that it was for 3 of them. Also, if they have different documents, but it's the same person at the same time, they can do group 1 entry. And they can have an agreement that when they're done, the employer can keep their journal rather than they have to hold the journal, for the 7 years or 10 years or whatever it is. But they're not the one that says. So there is a state, I'm not seeing my note on which state it is that allows for it. So what I'm going to tell you is you need to look at your state, Oregon state statutes, and actually they're very detailed. As a matter of fact, I came upon a word that I wanted to talk about here, and that's contemporaneously, meaning at the moment. There are a few states, Oregon is one of them, that uses that word with the journal. And what that means is it's not okay for you to pre-fill out your journal before you get to the appointment. It means you're expected to fill it out as you're notarizing or within the appointment anyways. That's what the expectation is. If your statute doesn't use that word contemporaneously, or they don't say at the time, then you're in a state that would allow you to pre-fill out the journal as much as you know, so that it's easier for you to manage at the table.
Excellent. Okay. Great new word for everybody to know too.
Word of the day.
Gigi wants to know, can we talk about this John Smith signature? Is that on that you see in your example?
Oh, yeah.
Signing over 3 boxes.
Right. So I'm going to tell you that if you're in a state that does not have statutes around the journal, meaning it's just recommended, you can do things like this. That's fine. You could do that for a loan signing, 1 big long line. I don't recommend it personally, only because if they picked a line where you round out of name or you only have the letters TH, it's not showing the signature line, right? It's not showing the whole guy's name. So that's, and they just wanted that particular entry. That's where that you could run into trouble. But I'm going to tell you, if you are in a state that only encourages or recommends, that's a legal way to get it done. And you might do that with somebody who's an older person. Maybe they're having difficulty signing their name 10 more times. Then I could see where that might be helpful. That is not okay, actually, in the state of California. You must have a signature for every single notarization separately. You may not do this. We used to do this. This was a common shortcut for us until maybe about 5 years ago. They said, don't do that anymore. We're getting copies and we're only getting parts of people's names. It's not helpful. Remember, the whole idea, there's a purpose for this journal. One purpose is to protect me. The other one is to verify I fulfilled my obligations in compliance with the state, that I'm in. So again, if you're in a state where it's okay to do what you want, you may do this. If you're in a state that does not specify that every notarial act needs a signature, then you're okay.
All right. Beautiful. Guys, there's amazing, incredible amount of questions involved, but we still have a ton more material to get through and another FAQ. So we'll have some resources on how to contact, where to do some research on your own to get your questions answered at the end as well. But Laura, let's move on. Working smarter.
So let's work smarter, not harder. And there are many ways for us to be more efficient. And why do we need to be more efficient? Why is it important for me to get to business and get it done? Well, one, I might be able to fit more assignments in my workday. One more assignment that otherwise I would not be able to take. I would spend less time on a lower paying job. So sometimes we're going to get that job and it's like, dang it, I probably should have charged more. Well, then get in, take care of that business and move on. You might just need some buffer time for calls, for dropping your packages, for bio breaks. Some of us, I've seen pictures on Facebook where they're stacked on the hood of their car, like 10 assignments in the same day. And it's like, when were you planning to stop at the restroom? So the only way you're going to build, you got to build that in, is to be more efficient within the time frame of this appointment. If you have been a notary forever, like I have, you start to get carpal tunnel, arthritis, pain in your hand from that. You're holding that pen and that last assignment is killing you. So if you can find ways to do less writing, beautiful. It takes less time and it helps your hand. And then we need to, though, make sure that it's not all about get in and get out. We need to balance efficiency with effectiveness, right? It's not just about how fast can I get this part done and get out. We really need to make sure we're meeting the requirements to be compliant, number one. And number two, we don't want to be making the signer feel like they got to, go at warp speed as well. So there are 4 areas where we can streamline. Prepare before you go. If you're in a state that doesn't require you to do it at the table, you could do some ahead of time. Another one would be, don't do all the journaling up front or all of it at the end when your signer isn't doing anything. Include it during your presentation. I might have put it later, but I'll say it since I'm here. Use both sets of documents to your advantage. We always try to look at when bad things happen, AKA pandemic, what are some good things that may have happened that I may not have thought about or experienced before? And one of those things for me was I changed my presentation and I chopped off 10 minutes. And the way I changed it is I used both sets of documents. Instead of keeping the one set for just in case I make a mistake, they have a set, and then I'm 6 feet away, right? Social distancing. I have a set, they're in the same order, they're the same documents. And I lead them through the package from my set in front of me. And they have their set in front of them. Then I've got my journal open. And I'm journaling as I go. Because my journal's right there. And they're scanning down to where I say, hey, down in the bottom right or bottom left, that's where you're going to be putting your signature and the date. Because I can see that from my set. And while they're figuring that out, I'm putting in, okay, today's date, I'm putting in acknowledgement, and I am getting through that journal. And what I found is when I had to say, this is your deed of trust, there are 17 pages. And on the 17th page is where you're going to be signing by. So I'm giving a little prep and blah, blah, blah. And then I hand them the document for them to sign and to initial. That time right there is being eaten up. So I don't have to do that now. I'm talking and presenting it because I know the documents and I'm writing over here and I'm saving a lot of time that way. Use wording stamps either in the certificates or your journal. So like the word acknowledgement takes a long time to write. That's why I use a stamp. Journal entry shortcuts were allowed. So even in California where we're not allowed very many, we've got 3 columns where they're optional. We can start right there. We can use a stamp, that's another one. So there are lots of ways that we can shrink down that time. So the 2 methods within an appointment that I see we have opportunity is proactive management of the job itself. Your conversation with your signers before you get there, make sure they understand what's going to happen, how much time you need, and what would be taking place. The way you prep your package, and make sure you've gone through your notary instructions before you get there. Highlight what you need to remember. Oh, I got to get a copy of that ID. Oh, I need to make sure I'm using blue ink only, so that you can briefly look at it when you come in with just the highlighted points to say, okay, I got all that stuff ready to go. Your table setup. Use both sets of documents as I just described, rather than one set of documents and you're hovering right next to them. You don't have to. They're adults. You just need to be competent at being able to describe the document and where signatures and initials go. And your instructions to the signer so that they know what's going on here. This is about, here's your document, here's where you're going to sign, blah, 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 and we're moving on. I'm flipping over my pages. And so when I see they're like, okay, and they're moving down, I'm writing. All right, so everybody works at the table. The other area is the documentation shortcuts. So that can happen also in your certificate. And I know this is about the journal, but you know what? You could use a date stamp on your certificate. The only thing required to be original on the certificate is going to be your signature and your seal. All right, so you could pre-stamp. I have a stamp that says Laura J. Biewer, Notary Public. that I can just stamp on the certificate, the date stamp. I don't always use all my stamps. It depends on what my appointment's about. Utilize out-of-state wording when your state allows it. Now, most states pretty much use everybody else's, but California, of course, we typically say, no, it's my way or the highway. So jurats are like that. That's why I have a wording stamp, a jurat wording stamp. And if there's enough white space on the document, I can stamp it right there, fill it out. It's really faster and it's safer because it's on the document. It's on the signature page still, rather than an attachment. The other thing would be like the acknowledgement. For us, we don't always have to use California wording. If I'm handling a property that's in Arizona or Florida, I can use their wording. It's going back there to be filed. The only thing I got to worry about is representative capacity, that they're not the trustee. It doesn't say that in the notary certificate. Much faster to use what's provided to me than to have to stamp it or to attach a loose certificate. And of course, in the journal, use some of those shortcuts I mentioned. So for states that do not require the journal, consider taking that grouping. But when you're grouping it, make sure that things that are not repetitive, like the different names of documents, the different notarial acts you're performing, are included so that it's a better picture. You know what? I performed acknowledgments for these 4 documents, and I performed a jurat for the signature affidavit. All right, so it's just more clear about what you did. Use abbreviations like ACK or circle the A if you're using that style of journal, or use a wording stamp. For states where it's required, take the shortcuts where you're allowed. California, we don't have very many, but we do have some. If you're writing the name and address every time, you're taking too much time. If you're writing where you met them every time, you're taking too much time. If you're repeating your notes, you don't need to do that. Think of it as just one long column for that assignment. Use those stamps for the areas I told you about, the notarial act, the date, the ID column. Also, you might use it for a common document like deed of trust, right? Every loan signing, except for sellers packages, are going to have deed of trust. Refis purchases, they're going to have a deed of trust. So you might have a stamp that says deed of trust. And then you could just write in, oh, and here's that property address. If there's another common document that you feel like, you know, I don't want to write this one down, you could do it on that as well. All right, so remember, NSAs who are certified agreed to keep a journal, even if your state didn't require it. Journals in states where it's required may be audited for compliance or in response to a complaint or because of cases of fraud. So it's important that you're maintaining it per what your statute says. Remember that the journal is your evidence. It's your evidence that you fulfilled your notarial obligations, and it's your best protection in a lawsuit. Now let's talk a little bit about resources. Your handbook, every state has a handbook. If you don't have a handbook in your possession, you should. You should have a handbook and you should go through there and see what your requirements are in your state for the journal specifically. I named some interesting exceptions today, but not all of them. We would be here all day if I did, because there's so many differences. Also, California has a newsletter, but there may be other states that have some kind of communication outside of the handbook produced by the Secretary of State or whoever your regulating agency is, that is an interpretation or rules that tell you how to implement that statute. I also used NNA law primers, or primers, however you want to say that, and about, I want to say there's around 30 different states that there's a law primer that was developed by the NNA. There are states where there isn't one, but they have handbooks, right? So lots of different resources you can look to. And of course, you can call your Secretary of State, assuming they're answering calls now, or email them, or write to them, you know, reach out to them if you don't understand something. You can try hotline with the NNA. They're going to be using these same resources. Just by the way, these are the resources we use. We have a couple of additional ones as well, but these are the really bread and butter ones that we use. We're going to look at what your statute says. Now, we're not attorneys, so we're not allowed to interpret it. right? We can just give you our best understanding of how that looks. If you want a true interpretation or any special rules, that has to come from your regulating agency. Okay, I think we're ready for some more Q&A, Bill, but I'm going to leave up my contact information because we may or may not get to your specific question. You can go to my website and pick a quick call. They're free, 15 minutes, and you can schedule a call with me. You can email me. Every week, there's a free coaching call. Bill, myself, and Carol Ray have TNT, Tuesday Notary Titans, at 12 o'clock Pacific Coast time, and we answer questions like this all the time. So that might be of interest to you. And then YouTube, I subscribe to my channel. Every week I put out another video addressing different aspects of the law or things that apply to notaries in the world of notaries. So these are all ways that you can get to me or get more information. All right, Bill, let's hit the Q&A.
Let's do it. Well, first, before we do that, guys, we want to just tell you about the Laura Biewer Presents Training Library. Guys, Laura obviously is an expert in her field, and her passion, it drives her crazy when I call it general notary work because it's so specific. There's specific niches within general notary work, but it is extremely powerful, and it's a great way to build additional service and revenue streams in your business. So you're not just, as she says, a one-trick pony. You're not just a loan signing agent. You can build a very sustainable business with general notary work. Well, Laura has developed the Laura Biewer Presents Library, and I'm just going to share the screen here for a minute, Laura, because I want to show them inside what is in Laura Biewer Presents. Can you guys see this okay? So there's very specific training, and this is highly specific training about the documents and the situations that you're going to run into in general notary work. It's last wills and testaments. It's living trust appointments, powers of attorney. There's examples of the documents. There is in-depth, like 2-hour trainings that teach you how to fill it out, how to notarize it, what the mood of the environment is, and most importantly for most of us is how to get more of that business. How do you market yourself? All of this, adoption documents, medical facilities, oath acknowledgments and jurats, kind of that back to basics stuff. We've got the jailhouse notary work, getting apostille work, living trust, hospital, the notary light series is in there, plus this new and emerging section on how to become a notary public and some of the more refined training. All of that included in Laura Biewer Presents. It's a one-time fee. It's $97 for lifetime access, and we'll give you the TNT discount. It's 15% off. So I am going to put the link to get that right inside. Use coupon code TNT and save yourself 15% on that. It is just one time, $97, and you get lifetime access. Plus you get all the downloads. So the PowerPoint presentations that you're watching today, that's all included. You can download, use that. We have sample documents, all that good stuff. All right, that's it. I don't want to take up too much time with the plug, but guys, if you are interested in general notary work, you've got to be part of this program. It's the best, most in-depth and thorough training on the internet right now. Great. Yeah, we've got lots of comments on there, worth every penny. Now,
another thing I want to add, Bill, before we move on to Q&A, is that we continually add new training about 3 times a year minimum, sometimes more. We will add more training like what you're experiencing on different topics. So it continues to grow. But if you already have it, you'll get that training added to your library at no additional cost.
Yeah. Constant, and look, every quarter we're doing something. Right. Plus we've got that more in-depth training on the refinement of the training and building your businesses. Right. Good stuff. So we've got some really great questions. Okay. First one, I think we need to clarify in California about when they have to use the California specific jurat and when they don't. Can you clarify that?
Absolutely. You must use, in California, you must use the California jurat mandated wording with the little notice box 100% of the time, regardless of where the document is coming or going. Just always know that has to be California. The acknowledgement is only for California documents. So if it's a California property, it's going to be filed in California. You must replace whatever's there with the California wording. When I don't have to use the California wording is out-of-state documents that are going to be sent back out of state, and usually that means it's an out-of-state property, or it's a document that's recordable and it's going to be recorded out of state. That's what I'm talking about. That's when you can just use the acknowledgement wording that was provided to you, as long as two things apply. You see the word acknowledgement or acknowledge in their wording, because if you don't see that, it's not an acknowledgement, it's a signature witnessing, it's a different act. All right, so make sure it has the word acknowledgement. The second thing that you want to look for is representative capacity or certifications, meaning that it says John Smith, comma, trustee, John Smith, single man. It shows the vesting of the property next to their name, or there's some other kind of representation like attorney in fact, right? We are not allowed to certify that. They can sign that way in the document, but I'm not allowed to certify it. All right, so that's what I'd have to replace it. Otherwise, I could use it.
Excellent. I think that really does a good job of clarifying it. And we'll ask Kirsten's question here. Kirsten, I see you've asked this a couple times. I believe we have answered this already. So for a loan signing, do I record just deed of trust on the type of document, or do I need to record the name of each document notarized? So can we clarify that on what the best practice is versus compliance?
So for states that are required, every state required the name of every document for every notarization. You need to describe it. It's just the name. And hopefully you have a journal that gives you space to do that. And you could group them all in one. If you're in a state that allows grouping, if you're in a state that it's recommended to have a journal, but there's no direction because it's not a requirement, I recommend that you name every one of them, even if it's just in your note box or additional information box. I had a deed of trust, a signature affidavit, a compliance agreement, a power of attorney, blah, blah, blah. That's what you should be doing there. Is there something that I'm missing that I'm not answering your question?
No, I think that does a good job. So I really think it boils down to two is just that, some states like California requires that every single notarized document has a different line entry in the journal for each signer of that document. And you have to go through the whole thing, every single document. There's no getting around it in California specifically. And then the other states have their own variations of that and flexibility. So the question, I think, Kirsten, is, if you're in a state that allows the grouping, you could put loan signing package as the type of document. And then like Laura's saying, which documents are in there, just write it in your notes. So there's a record of the types of documents that you notarized. Right. Patricia Bridges, thanks for raising your hand. Would you like to unmute and ask your question? Patricia Bridges. Oh, I don't have it. I have to unmute. Sorry. Well, there you go. I'm asking you to unmute. There you go.
Now, thank you. It wouldn't let me. I was freaking out. Good afternoon, everybody. You all are my heroes. You know that. I have the electronic journal. For those who don't know me, I'm from Illinois. It's not required, but it's my best practice. I love, love, love Notary Gadget. You just taught me something, Laura, about putting in my fee from title and signing services. I should just be putting my dollar for each notarial act. Is that correct?
Well, because you're in a state that doesn't require, you can do what you want.
Okay. But I did hear you and Bill say that, my profit over the notarial actions I'm taking is my own personal business or my own personal, notarization. My own personal accounting, I'm sorry.
No, Patricia, you're right. So my recommendation is why share more than you need to?
Yes.
If it's $5 a notarization, then that's all you need to put in there, and who cares about anything other than that? You're keeping that in your own software.
Okay. And it does itemize each type of notarization, which I really like, and a place for notes. And like you said, because it's not required, I can group them the way I want. And what I do is I have a statement and I copy and paste, and then I delete what was not happening at that particular signing. So thank you both. I really enjoy this.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
All right. Let's see. Yesenia, you're unmuted.
Hola.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Buenas tardes. Oh, excuse me. Buenos dias. Damn, I've been working too long.
Right.
Okay, so quick question. And I'm a firm believer that certain things happen in certain times for a reason. Here's my reason. While this webinar was going on, I got a call from a customer who has loan signing docs. So they wanted to see if I did this because they're Spanish speakers. And here's their situation. I haven't come across this one yet. So their California state driver's license or IDs have expired, and it was prior to COVID, okay? But they have their green card, their residency card. Is that acceptable for an ID? I would think that the loan people know this, but I don't know this answer.
Yeah, the answer is no. Green card is not on the green card may be used in limited situations for USCIS documents, but for notaries, no.
So then it would have to be that they have 2 witnesses that can confirm that they are who they are. Is that correct?
Exactly so.
And the lender would have to approve that, Yesenia.
Yes.
The lender has to prove that.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's not my place to assume that the lender knows this already.
And don't ever make that assumption, especially when it comes to IDs. You would think they ask in advance and know all this stuff, but they just don't sometimes. And you'll definitely want to get clearance from title and from, or I would just go to the closing agent and say, here's the situation, and let her escalate it to the lender to get approval for the credible witnesses for that transaction. Because even though you're legally allowed for notarization, the lender still might turn it down.
I see. Yeah, because he did tell me it's just a loan modification, but, you know, again, I wanted to be sure. So thank you.
Yeah, welcome. All right, Dana Keller, thanks for being here. Would you like to share your question? You are unmuted. And go.
Hang on a second.
Hey, Dana.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good, because I'm having a problem with my Zoom. You guys, I can get your audio, but I can't see your picture. Okay, you may have answered this at the chat, but I had to go out and come back a couple of times, so I lost my chat history. In my notary journal, I have a separate column specifically that says witnesses. I'm assuming, and you can tell me if I'm correct or not, that if I'm notarizing a document that requires witnesses, but those witness signatures don't need to be notarized, I would have the witnesses sign in that column right next to the signer's name?
Yes. Yeah, you would. Even if the signatures are not being notarized, if these are credible witnesses, if that's the kind of witness they are, when you're using credible witnesses and you have a journal requirement, they're requiring you to have it in the journal.
Okay.
So it's not about notarizing them. Also, one of the things I do in the additional information is if I have document witnesses, very different. They're not notary witnesses. They're just somebody to watch them sign. I either include their name or have them sign in my additional information.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And another quick question, e-journal sites, websites or companies, do you have any recommendations for those?
I'm not using one right now because in California, although it's allowed to have an e-journal, somebody asked that, I saw. The problem is there isn't an e-journal that includes a thumbprint, and we're required to get them.
Yeah, I know California. As I was going back, as you were talking, I was looking at the manual for Arizona notaries. It says that the journal has to be in paper form, but it doesn't necessarily say that it has to be like a hardbound. So I'm thinking if an e-journal, you can always print those pages.
Yeah, that's a good question. That might be a question for the Secretary of State.
Yes.
Because I know I
can't answer that.
I mean,
yeah, I'm kind of questioning the Secretary of State. I've asked them the same question a couple of times, and I come back with different answers, and I'm kind of wondering who they got working there.
That's our world.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Susie, thanks for being here. Would you like to unmute and ask your question? Oh, I got to unmute you. I'm going to unmute you right now. I'm asking you to unmute. Susie, there you go.
Hi there.
Hey.
Hi, Laura. Hi, Bill. I'm so glad to be here. You know, I got my commission during this whole pandemic here in California, so It's like great time, great timing. But here's a couple questions about the journal. I'm in California, so I've been handwriting every single box in my journal. It's the modern journal of notarial events. And I'm just so paranoid, so I'm writing everything out. I'm not using the little check boxes that they offer under description of documents. And my question is, under that description of documents, I've just been writing acknowledgement or jurat. And I've been using additional information to list the specific type of document. But now after hearing you, Laura, am I incorrect that I can write both acknowledgement and the type of document under description of document?
So no, let me specify that those are two different pieces of information, and what should go in description of document is the name, not what kind of notarial act you perform. I don't have that journal, I don't use it, but somewhere in that journal, I believe it has a place to circle A or J towards the left, and that's where you identify the type of that, but I wouldn't just circle it, I'd write ACK. I do something to write something because California does not like that circling the A or J business.
Yeah, I do see. Okay, I do see the A and J under the description of documents, but it's besides right next to the different types of documents that could possibly be. Yes.
All right. So I'm not seeing that journal, so I don't know the exact layout. But if they have the act in the same column as the name of the document, then you're going to write the name of the document, and then you could write acknowledgement or jurat under it. If that's how that layout is.
Yes, it has the little where you check off the boxes, but like I said, I'm not using that. I'm writing it out. I just wanted to make sure to see if I could write the type of document there under the description of document and also write.
What should go there.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. And just one more question I have is I've been taking IDs and writing their names exactly the way their driver's license say, and sometimes it's for like first name, middle name, and 2 last names.
Yeah.
And I'm writing that all out, but when it comes to their signature, they're just writing their signature. They don't have to write 4, right?
Right. So there's 2 different things happening here. One is we're notarizing their name as it appeared on the document. That's the signature and the name that we are certifying, right? So that's what they're going to want to sign in your journal. I would want that, the same signature in my journal that I have on the document. In terms of the name, if you are in a state that requires name and address, it's the name and address that's on the ID. So the name, you'd write all of it. If in California, however, we're not required to put name and address. So we don't have to we can put the name that's in the document, which is what I do. I match the name on the document in my journal so that the signature and name match in my journal later, because I'm not required to record what's on the ID.
All right, thank you. So that clears it up. Thank you very much.
Great question, Susie. Thanks for being here, and congratulations on your new commission.
Thanks.
Nancy Huffaker, thanks for being here. Guys, we're going to do 4 more questions, and then we're going to wrap up so we don't go past 10:30, okay? Nancy Huffaker, I am going to unmute you. I'm asking to unmute you now.
Hey, you did it. Thank you. If you're in a, I'm in Florida, so it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want. I get that. But if you're in a state that requires a journal, is there a specific way to make a correction?
In the journal? So actually, I did not see, when I read all those journal statutes, I didn't see anything addressing correcting the journal. The journal is your work, nobody else's. So if you have to correct a journal, you would treat it like, how would I correct a document? I'd strike what's wrong, right? I'd put what's right. And I'd make it a little initial so I know I'm the only one that did that. And so if I have an entry that really wasn't a document I notarized, it didn't happen, I have 2 ways to go about that. One is I can just draw a single line across that entry. And in the notes, I'd write incompleted or refused to complete, or whatever the thing was that it was not notarized.
Thank you.
All right, great.
You're welcome, Nancy.
Lorraine Schechter, thanks for being here. I have unmuted you and you can ask your question.
Okay, thanks. And thank you both. Just a really quick one. It's kind of obvious, but I just want to make sure. When you're putting the date in your journal, are you And as you're notarizing each document, are you dating, I'm sorry, are you putting the time that you're doing each document, or are you just putting like the appointment time to show that you've done all of those at the same time?
So it depends on the state that you're in. In California, you will be changing that exact time to whatever's that next document. So I might have started at 10. My next document was at 10:05. My next one was at 10:12. My next one was at 10:15. And I would do that. If you're in a state that doesn't require it, you could just put the appointment time if you want. If you're in a state that does require the time, then and you're not grouping them, the expectation is the time reflects what you're doing. If you're grouping them, what you might do is a start and end time.
Thank you.
All right, great question. Thank you. Jack Schaefer, thanks for being here. I've asked to unmute you. There you go.
Hey, so a couple quick questions. If I'm a second signer or I'm the notary for a second signer, can I put jurat wording in handwriting and not use a loose leaf, even if the original is an acknowledgement? Or do I have to have a stamp, and do I have to stamp matching jurat or acknowledgement with the current document? And then the second question is, can I use a date?
Let's just address the first one.
Yeah, hold on. We'll save your second question because this one's might need some clarification. So Laura, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, Jack, for what state are you in?
Arizona.
Okay, so if you're starting with an acknowledgement is what's on the document and you can't use it, you would replace it with another acknowledgement. You would not change to a different notarial act. So you would either have a stamp, a wording stamp that's acknowledgement wording, and you might have another one that's jurat wording. And you would use the appropriate one to replace what's on there. Does that make sense, Jack?
He went mute again, sorry. There you go.
Sorry.
That's okay, Jack. Did that make sense, the first part?
Yeah, so if there's space on an acknowledgement, I can add acknowledgement wording and then just have them sign on the original document.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter if I stamp it or just write it in, or it has to be a stamp.
It doesn't have to be a stamp. You could write it in if the wording was brief enough. Like for Arizona, your acknowledgement wording is like a sentence. Yeah. So sure, it is possible for you to print that, not cursive, but print that and sign it and stamp it. Make sure that your printing is nice and neat and tidy, that it's very legible.
Yeah, my printing is terrible, so
and you might not want to be doing that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes, I've had to do that with a jurat before, where I had to hand write it in because they had to have it on the document. It was going out of the country.
Okay, the second question is super quick. Can I use a date stamp for the signer's dates?
For the signer's dates? Do you mean, are you talking about in the journal?
No, on the docs. So for loan docs, I had a woman who, her hand, she had to like take ice and ice her hand. We had to take breaks because signing and dating was terrible. And I have a date stamp. Can I just date stamp for her?
So I have two answers. The first answer is, why not? I can do it. But my second answer is the document is not my responsibility. That's the signer's responsibility. So they might want to get permission to use a date stamp. I don't see that there's an issue, but I'm not responsible for that part of the document. I'm only responsible for my certificate. So I cannot say yes or no, it's okay for her to do it.
It'd be lender permission for sure.
Yeah.
Some lenders do have an issue with it.
Exactly. So I cannot just say yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We got two more questions. Anna DeCayan, I've sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so very much. This has cleared up. This is actually cleared up some issues or questions I didn't even know I had, and presented a whole bunch of other questions, and I have a whole list. So I know you want to hurry up and get this done. So the one thing about the ID, if you said to match the loan documents in the journal. So should I note somewhere that the ID has additional names, or that's not even important?
So I'm not quite sure I'm getting your question.
So in what I've done is I've actually to write down the person's name. So if the loan documents have 2 names and the ID, the driver's license has 4 names, what I have done in my journal is write down all 4 names. What I just heard you say is the names in my journal should match the loan documents.
And what I said is that's in California.
And I am in California.
Okay, yes, in California, well, in California, it is an optional column, so we can do what we want. I just said, what I said is that's how I do it, because I have the option. I choose to put in my journal what's on the document, and that's what I notarized. If you're in the other states, you have to work with the ID because that's the requirement.
Okay, well that's good information because actually it will help save me time.
Very good.
By matching the loan documents. So something else I want some clarification on is in my journal when I'm writing down specifically for the ID, I identify it by the first 2 characters of the state. So for me, I put CADL and then I put the number. So do I also have to write in there DMV?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In California, it's required.
Okay, I did not know that. So that I should go now. Should I go back and correct my documents? Correct my journal?
I'm being recorded, so I'm going to say no. If you want to hear anything else, you better talk to me personally.
Got it. I'm clear. And then, and then one other question in regard to the modern journal. Yes. I originally used the Modern Journal and discovered that that's probably not the best one for California. Right. So, actually, I already know the answer. So, okay, that's it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you both so much.
Anytime, Anna. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. And we got our last question here, guys. This is going to be from Rita. No pressure, Rita. This is the last question. I just sent you a request. Hi, Rita, we can hear you.
So I'm in Illinois and we're not required to have a journal. And I just want to clarify, Bill, I use the same kind of journal you're using. Mm-hmm. And in the front of the journal where it shows an example, it says it fills out the whole driver's license number. And that's what I had been doing. But then Laura, I talked to you last week and you just said, all I really need to put is, the state, DL, and expiration date. So I don't really need the whole number then?
Well, when you're not required, then you can choose to do it how you want.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're going to do multiples, you might do the number 1 time and then never repeat that.
And then the other thing too is a liability, right? Because some of the reasons that the states don't allow it is that having that personal information, because you can get a lot of information from a driver's license, birth date of somebody. So that you may not want to take on that liability if you don't have to.
Right, if you don't have to.
The other thing I want to clarify, just a couple quick things is, so I have been listing out every notarial act and I print their name as it appears on the loan documents, and then I just have them sign it they're going to sign how they normally sign regardless. It seems like, they could have 3 names printed on their driver's license, but they're still going to sign it how they normally sign it. So just clarification there. Should they sign it to match what the loan documents say? Should they just sign how their driver's license is signed? That, and then also too, I'm discovering I can just group them all together since it's not mandatory for me to have a journal, and then just have them sign one time instead of going down the list and signing. Okay,
so regarding the signature, what I want to say is the signature is not our area or the unauthorized practice of law to direct them how they should be signing. I show them what the expectation is from, the lender or title. Here's how they have your name. They're expecting it to look like this. And when they sign whatever it is, which I usually can't read, I say, is it all in there? And they say, yes. Okay, I want to repeat that signature in my journal. I'm not going to ask them sign differently in my journal.
Okay. Right. Okay. And I think I've you've already answered my other questions. So thank you.
Beautiful. Great way to end
All
it.
right, Bill.
Thank you so much. Laura, thank you so much. I mean, you clearly put lots of time, energy, resources, and you geeked out on this so well. Thank you for sharing this with us. I know this was helpful. Thank you for all the amazing remarks in there. And I hope that this training helps us all raise the bar of our industry and help protect us when we need it and help us enjoy our business even a little bit more. So thank you for that, Laura. And thank you to all who joined us on a Saturday. Thank you for growing yourself and your business. Have a great weekend, guys.